Hi, everyone. As we're piling in, I'd like to start talking very slowly to keep allowing the people in. Look at my wonderful background here of all our friends who have created books. This is Chris Rose's book called Light and Materiality. This is Michael Benson's book called Planetfall. Another one by Michael Benson called Cosmic Graphics. Another one by Michael Benson called Space Odyssey. Very good, all three of them. The book by Claire Guest called Daisy's Gift, and the book by Professor Anne-Sophie Barwich, I should say Dr. Claire Guest, Professor Anne-Sophie Barwich, called Smellosophy. And there's another book here called Dr. Dogs by Maria Gudowicz. So all these are highly recommended, and I have no problem telling you all to go buy them and read them. I'm advertising my friends. I don't get any money out of it, so I think it's okay. So we have 22 people. So let me first start by welcoming everyone to the second day of the inaugural Osmocosm conference, coming to you live from MIT and the planet on October 29th, 2021, Friday. It's 9 a.m. here in Boston. First of all, I want to again thank the team that is behind this. This has been a labor of love. Everybody's a volunteer. There's no money involved. It's free for the planet. And we're here to launch the machine olfaction industry proper, to prepare ourselves for the future where our phones can sniff us, our watches can sniff us, and they can tell about our mental and physical health, as well as about the threats from our environment. The team has been working on this for 8 months to put it together, and it consists of Nikhil Lai, Karolina Sulich, Professor Chris Rose, Litoya Nakopoulou, Michael Benson, Dimitris Ioannidis, Lyndon Gledhill, and A.L. Perry from the Center for Bits and Atoms has also been helping. So we thank everyone for joining us today. And I'm going to give it up to Karolina, who's going to introduce our first and keynote speaker, Sissel. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Great to see you again during our day 2. And I'm really pleased to have Sissel opening today as our keynote. It will take far too long to tell all of her accomplishments. I can just say that she's working with olfaction for many years now. She's a researcher and she has a background in chemistry, mathematics, and linguistics. Recently, she opened a big solo show in Oslo. Her laboratory is based in Berlin, and I think we can see her in her lab right now. She worked with so many dimensional smells that it's hard to list them all. Completed for example, city smellscapes research project. And she's asking incredibly important question: can smell be measured? How can smell be measured? Can we make tools to trigger smell memory? And her work is really remarkable. So I won't be speaking any longer, and I introduce Sissel to share with us her insights. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for inviting me to this short notice. I'm used to that, and just returning from an incredible experience up in the north. This is kind of continuation of that experience, I hope. So I have a couple of slides that kind of take you through a journey of my passion and commitment to the topic of smell over nearly 30 years. So in beginning of the 90s, I decided to dedicate myself to the sense of smell. How do I move this forward? Sorry, okay. To the sense of smell full time, all the time. 7 years in the field made me very, very confident that this is going to be my topic for the rest of my life. I don't know how this can move on. So I'm going to take you through some of the way I work and what I have done over all these years. Being in the field, I don't know, how do I move on here? Matt, can you help me? Yeah.
It looks like it's moving. You aren't the molecule.
Yes, but I'm pushing more than it actually move. Anyway, everything we breathe contain smell molecules. The air, only thing we share in this world is the air we breathe. And this air contains multiple types of information provided by small molecules. This became the topic of my work. Over the years, I've been looking into smells. Oh my God, it doesn't work here.
So all you have to do is just click with your mouse.
I don't have a mouse.
With your trackpad. See, there you go. You're controlling it now.
Yeah, no, it's better. Okay. Anyway,
Okay.
so out in the field, working, looking into smells, using my own nose for the purpose has been what has driven me, and observing and understanding the world from the perspective of the nose over 30 years. Here you see me all over, and here in beginning of 2000, I got approached by the industry, and I decided to take on the challenge of challenging the existing industry for the purpose to explore what smell could be beyond the bottle. So in collaboration with various companies, in the end, I decided to go with the one that convinced me most, in this case, IFF. And they decided to sponsor or to support my research from then on. So I got access to multiple types of technology that enable me to understand the sense of smell beyond my own nose. So over the years, I've been using Headspace mobile devices to collect molecules, record smell sources all over the world. And all the recordings correspond to my database, which is this one, consisting of up to 10,000 molecules recorded and collected over nearly 30 years. So with the smell recordings, I'm able to reproduce most of the smell I've been recording. And these smells are used for various purposes. Among others, I have done city smellscapes, looking into smells in cities for various purposes all over the world. Here are Shanghai. Talking nose is a very important aspect of my work, also looking into language. How do we communicate smell? How do we speak about smell beyond semantic and semiotics? So over 25 years, I've tried to develop methodologies, how to do this. And looking into some para-linguistic, ways of understanding smell, emotional expression towards the smell, rather than looking for the words and terms metaphorically used towards the smell. So here are various devices that I use for my purposes. The lexicon have now up to 5,000 expressions, and these are various devices and para-linguistic softwares and hardwares, building up a database around expressions towards various smells all over the world, simultaneous research going on all over in Nuuk, in South Africa, in China, in Korea, and various other places. People are smelling expression, sounds, phonetics towards the same smell. And a database that's building up throughout that, and artificial intelligence are making sense of sorting these kind of expressions out. One version of it is on display in Oslo at the moment, and you can hear some of the expressions then on display in the museum. So here are various smells. So here are others project where I look into the replicated, reproduce smells that I have done. This is a project I started with MIT in 2002 during the Bush government, looking into, can one smell a person's psychological state of mind? Can one smell as a person is afraid? Yes, one can. I train my nose every day. My nose is, I think, the most advanced there is out there. 25 years of passionate using my nose have made me a very skilled smeller and a very skilled understander of what smell can do. So this is a project where the replicated body sweat of anxious man is embedded in a nanotechnology, embedded in the walls of a museum in this case, and you activate the wall and you activate the smell of a person. Decontextualize the smell from its original context. You acquire incredible responses beyond the notion of hedonic and the like. So this is Singapore. This is Shanghai. The wall of emotions. What we all know, that first, the biggest trigger of emotion and activation of memory is the sense of smell. And I believe that without an emotional reaction, there is no action. To all the issues in the world, we need to tell the story differently. We need to go away from the dystopian rhetoric, and maybe smell is the way to tell all these issues in a different way, engaging with everybody in a different way. So here are various projects around smell preservation and smell heritage, which I started 25 years ago. So these are in India, looking into legacy of a stone, knowledge embedded in the stone knowledge, and activating together with the Bangalore, high-tech park, a methodology how to amplify molecules within the stone. And these are things I've done over the years in a much more complicated and sophisticated way. So this work is on display at the Natural History Museum in south of India. And here are other projects on the same kind of approach in Australia, looking into ownership of land. How can we tell a story about the indigenous past without, again, showing images and telling things, only written words? So here I developed something called emotional artifacts, where the smell recorded are replicated, embedded in objects. So you can actually engage with history in a different way. This is Detroit, which I did recently, also with the gentrification of neighborhoods, what type of life has been there, what are we missing by removing. So these are 3D objects where smell is embedded in the object, and the shape of the objects are determined by the molecular structure that are recorded. So these objects are embedded with smell and the smell data forever. So 1 nanosecond of a person's life embedded in a 3D object, engaging with the audience a completely different way. And people are engaging and reacting beyond expectation. This is water cities in China, similar project. Looking into artifact smell as heritage. Pompeii is a new project I'm starting now, 10 years forward. I'm going into Pompeii. What are we missing by not recording the smell emitting from various parts of the ruins? This project is starting this year. So it's the topic of smell is obviously, much more now. People are aware that smell exists after COVID. We are now, for sure aware of invisibility much more than ever. This is another project I'm working on around chemical communication in nature. When I say nature, including all kinds of species in nature, collaboration with Max Planck Institute of Chemical Ecology, and having done a lot of field work, looking into insects and plants communicating, how to learn, how to scale down, so that we can scale up again in a different way. Learning from the other, what is this project all about? Understanding how communication happens in nature between the insect and the plant is essential to appreciate our surrounding in a different way, and also be able to do something about what the issues in climate change is all about. We have to do it different. It doesn't work anymore with images and a dystopian rhetoric. Maybe smell and playful, joyful way understanding these issues is the solution. So this is my recent exhibition in Oslo. There is absolutely no text. This is my exhibition overview. It's a combination of a score and a chemical and a periodic table. So every content, every situation is coded. You're invited on a journey using your sense of smell. And I looked into the air movement of the building. The air is the carrier of my messages. So everything we breathe, we share. The air is the only thing left that we all share. So using air to move molecules around and using weather stations, wind sensors on the Norwegian coast, sending information, activating my situation is what this exhibition is all about. Turning the inside out, outside in, and activating molecules in the surrounding using advanced technology, using chemistry, using anthropology, archaeology, geology, to do this right, and it works. No text, no information. Who is Sissel Tolaas? People are taken on a journey they never forget. And the response is massively. So this is a situation called the tree of life, starting with molecules from the ground in the earth up to the sky. And this goes over 2,000 square meters. People are scaling down, scaling up, understanding the world they live in from a different perspective. So here I have a little video, which I think is so relevant. This dog is smelling anxious man. The same project as I showed before with MIT. And it was fantastic. It's outside of the building. It's literally the outside wall become the inside wall. So this is a project I'm doing with the United Nations on the climate change. This is an expedition to Greenland. And over the years, I've been collecting molecules from various contexts and building up a database on what are the issues in the climate. How can we understand, biodiversity? How can we understand the issues beyond the way it looks? So here I'm on the South Pacific. This is in in Australia. On the coral bleaching. This is in Sri Lanka. And this is in the Mexico Gulf. So looking into how smell and chemical communication can be used to tell a different story about issues of concern in the world. Call it inequality, call it climate, call it, whatever. So this is the latest project I've been working on with Ginkgo Biotech in Boston, where we were able to sequence segments from DNA from segments from that Harvard herbarium of plants that got extinct. And I were able to detect the molecules together with Ginkgo and scan the world to find the same component. And we created and replicated the smell of extinct plant, what is here on display at the Natural History Museum in Bern. And it's not only about extinction in nature, which is part of evolution, but also extinction of human emotion. I think if we lose emotion, the only thing that separates us, that make us different from the machine, is that we have emotion. So here, if we don't take care of it, soon they will be extinct as well. So you put yourself on display, showing emotion towards extinction in nature, which is what this project is about. And this is also Venice Biennale this year. And I'm running out of time here. Anyway, smell coding is a massive, is also project I'm working on at the moment. How can we tell the story about issues using abstract smells for the purpose? The same way we use gas once upon a time to tell the gas is leaking. So this project started in Lund University in 1997 and has now taken various direction. And this is my contemporary version of a very analog one, which happened then. This is a 1,500 abstract molecule used to communicate various references, various issues out there. Call it mathematics in education, call it other issues. Education is a very important aspect of my work.
Sissel.
And I think, yes, I'm running out of time. So how can I tell the story using this kind of alphabet? As a kind of analog to the alphabet. This is a chemical. This is about pollution. Kids playing with pollution. Kids understanding pollution by smelling it. Enable them also to understand it in the context of joy and play, which I think is essential to learning and memory. So here is ocean research on the Sri Lanka chemistry. And all over the world, I emphasize the necessity of embedding the senses in all aspects of education. Otherwise, what are we talking about? If we don't do it now, we're never going to do it. So here is my little exhausted presentation. I am a little bit, over the top from Oslo. So thank you for your attention. And hopefully,
Sissel, that was amazing. Sissel, that was so good. Thank you so much. I wish we spent so much more time with you. Where have you been all my life? I mean, that is so wonderful. I am super thrilled with.
I don't even have a website.
Okay, so I think we're inviting you on behalf of the Osmocosm Foundation to become part of our think tank. and be in charge of education of smells to the world. Okay, so you're going to be joining David Carroll, who's a professor on the ethics part. Please join us and become a part of this, because part of our mission of the foundation that's behind this conference is to educate the planet about smell. I see there's questions for you. However, we're going to do them at the end. So now let me introduce Nikhil. He is going to talk for a very short presentation to tell you about his olfaction technologies review. And after that, we'll have Karolina, and then she'll talk about space. And then we'll have Joris, and Aaron will close. And at the end of this session, we're going to have a little bit of a Q&A, and then straight into the sci-fi law review, which is going to be very fun, live with real judges. So please welcome Nikhil, and Nikhil, take it away. You have 5 minutes or less if you can manage it.
Hi, yeah, sure. So I'm Nick, or Nikhil, and for the past few months, Andres and I and the rest of the team building this olfaction conference because we truly believe in this future that is olfaction. And I'd like to convince you a little bit why, at least from an engineering perspective. Where is, okay.
Maybe bottom left. Oh, there you are.
Okay, excellent. So, all right. So in a nutshell, the original way of detecting scent, the OG method, as some might call it, the traditional method is dogs or any other animals they have around us as humans from Neolithic time or even earlier. And this was because we knew back then, at least, that dogs had an extremely useful tool. Their sense of smell was tightly integrated with their brain, and they had access to it to use it to do more than just say, does this person have this sickness like we talked about? They used it for things like tracking, and these are tracking from miles and miles away. And so before we had Google Maps, before we had the internet, how else would we know how to get places? I mean, dogs were the only way in some cultures that we can navigate. And so when you look at even other animals, when bears can detect food, just the smell of food up to 18 miles away. And you look at rats being used today in Angola, where they're used to smell both landmines, but also have been shown to be able to detect tuberculosis in blood. These are the hero rats. I mean, it's clear that there is a tool here that we're really underutilizing. And so from an engineering perspective, there are like kind of three main technologies that we have been pursuing. The first is I'll describe it as like surface charge interaction. And that's largely where you have these styles of sensors that have a very active surface. And when a molecule approaches it, the surface says something different. It says, I am new, I have a lower resistance, for example, or there's like a variant of that output that we don't have a true representation of what that signal is, but there is a change. And so we have electrochemical gas sensors, metal oxide semiconductors like Stephanie's using yesterday. We have newer variants, next generation of metal oxide semiconducting sensors called nanowires. And these are only better, not because base technology is necessarily better, but just because they have a very high aspect ratio, a very high surface area that can be exposed to air. And then this is probably the most interesting one in this field. And this is the conductive polymer nanocomposite developed by NASA. And they actually use this to measure any kind of rare or insidious occurrence on the space station, ISS. So this tool can be used much in a similar way that the other tools can be used, say, hey, there's a new molecule on my surface, something's changing. But the variant here is that it uses polymers. So every polymer reacts slightly differently to a different volatile organic compound. And this technology is just fascinating, the way they figure this out. And then we kind of like go up one level in complexity. And this is probably the most similar to how mammals smell today, or some types of insects who have the ionotropic sensors with the ligand-gated ion channels, as Andrew was talking about yesterday. And so in binding event detection, we have one example I've worked on a little bit, which is the surface acoustic wave sensor, or a quartz crystal microbalance. These are both variants of mass-based detection. So you have a probe on the surface, and this probe detects your target molecule, and the detection is noted by the change in the waves on the surface, either that affect the SAW, the surface acoustic wave, or that affect the actual resonant frequency in the case of a quartz crystal microbalance. And then I think this is quite a promising method going forward, and a lot of companies are trying to pursue it. This is the field effect transistor-based method, which is where you have a probe detect on your gate of your transistor, much like you have in your computer, and then this probe turns on the transistor. Another one is interferometry. So we saw Aribel presenting yesterday on their Mach-Zehnder-based interferometer. This one explaining it takes maybe a little too long, so I'd encourage everyone to go to the Wikipedia article. But needless to say, it's a very cool method that is highly sensitive. SPR, source plasma resonance. This one is probably the most sensitive of the binding event detection methods on this list. But the crucial limitation here is that up until this point, we've only been talking about handheld methods, and this is fundamentally a benchtop method. And then we get to my personal favorite, which is the spectroscopic analysis standpoint, where at this point, mammals do detect like a very complex sense from their combination of different cells, but getting to the point where we have 400 million different detectors on a chip is going to take quite a while. To get there a little faster, I think spectroscopic analysis may be able to help us out. So an example of this is a photoionization detector, which is used in oil and gas today. This is kind of the gold standard a lot of people use in research. So Andreas is working on a company at this moment that uses GCMS for prostate cancer detection, and it works like very well. So this is a really well understood technique. Infrared spectroscopy, terahertz emissions. If anyone in the gather this evening, let's talk about terahertz if anyone's interested. I will go on and on about hours for some of these methods. And Raman surface enhanced spectrometry. So this is instead of doing an absorption technique with light, you're doing a scattering technique. And probably one of the most interesting methods in this particular genre, which is ion mobility spectrometry, which measures the weight of the molecule itself by how long it takes to move through a drift tube. So at the end of the day, like as technologists, we know there are many different methods of getting to where we want to go. All roads do lead to Rome. So when you're thinking about starting your company and you're thinking about detecting cancer in day one, make sure you think about it from the perspective of what is your core application? What are the problems you really want to solve in this world? And at the end of the day, people like myself and others on this list, like Joe Azzarelli and Andreas Merschen, and Aribel and all other great companies who presented so far, we'll come and help you out. There's plenty of different options, and we'll get there. But stick to the application, and I'm excited to see what the turnout from this conference is. Thanks.
Thank you, Nikhil. What a great and helpful and hopeful message you gave. And also, I want to alert everyone, Nikhil has actually condensed this presentation into a video that he can share if he doesn't mind on the chat, and everybody can go and watch it. And he has done a very good analysis of all the various techniques. Now, for Karolina. Karolina is actually an analog astronaut, amongst many other things. She has an interest in many things that overlap with my interests, including mushrooms, including space. And she went to a space camp, I guess. She's going to talk to us about that. Karolina, take it away. You have 5 minutes.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm just like starting to share my screen. I think it's going to be even less than 5 minutes because I'm super compact. Okay, so this is going to be a story of ideation with M5 Sensoria crew in a space facility, or like a space on Earth, so to speak. It's called Lunaris Research Station, and it's placed in Poland, in Piła, in the former military base. So they're emulating situation as of the lunar or Martian, it depends on the scenario, habitat where people can test and research different stuff. This is my amazing crew, Amanda, Brenda, Paul, JJ Hastings, and Katie, and and they were doing all different researchers. There are like engineers, some of them work with NASA, and SpaceX, and El Paso. Brenda works in El Paso, so I can speak about them along. They are very cool, and I would love to check. You checked all of them, and we were like researching many stuff. Here we are building like a plant space place, and we are planting plants in Regolith. That's a Katie Dickinson research from Cornell University. We're also planting lion's mane. But at one point, I invited them all to the journey to ideate as we invite you. So we gathered together and we met online with Andreas and other like Osmo members to think about how olfaction technology can be useful in space. And we developed this mirror bird that I would like to share with you. It's pretty wide, and first, like in this like left bigger part, we just shoot like very random ideas, and then we filtered them to think how how olfaction can be useful in space exploration or in the future habitats. And I strongly believe that the research that space research is stimulating can be applicable to Earth problems, many different Earth problems. So we were like first naming the problems, we were mapping populations, and we were like figuring outcomes. And here's like how it was like being more and more condensed. And I will just going to share with you a few ideas. So first is like for figuring out the fruits, if they are ready to be ripped, if they are ready to be eaten. This can be very, the sensors, olfactory sensors can be very useful in that. In space, smell like works a little bit different. This is the idea that we can create interfaces to communicate with different species, like bacteria, or even species that we are living forms that we are not aware of now yet, and we can try to figure them out if they are there, or like try to like get to know them. We can like also help to mitigate the smell of Earth when we were going to be coming back from space, because there is like a huge difference between how we perceive smells in the space and how we perceive smells on Earth. We can, this is the idea to also like mark the time through olfaction. And that could be very useful when you don't have the day and night stimulation. And finally, we can try to recreate the Earth sense to help us with homesickness. So that's only a few ideas how we can use those technology. And thank you. That would be it. And now I need to.
Wonderful. So much to ask here. And thank you for the excellent imagery. So moving right along so that we can have everybody do the Q&A together. We still have a little less than half an hour. We have to transition to the next section at 10 exactly. So I apologize for this. Pushing everybody. Next is Joris, who also, if I may ask him to rename himself. If you go up to there he is. You're now Osmocosm panelist speaker. If you go to the top right, 3 little dots, if you rename yourself with your actual name. Joris is going to talk to us about a project that has to do with cities and how maybe we can interact better with the wildlife that comes around, if that's what he decided to talk about. Joris, take it away. You have 5 minutes or less.
Hey folks, how's it going? Let me quickly share my screen. Give me 1 second. All right, so this project is called Spatial Spectrogrammy, and it looks at basically ways that we can sense a city using kind of alternative methods of understanding space. So fundamentally, I'm interested in understanding the ontology of relations between human and wildlife populations, and you thinking about the intrinsic like relationships between form, shape, the city, its architecture, its occupants. As a process of augmentation, architects are constantly concerning themselves with ways to deform or rearrange or kind of reform space or object things. And so basically what I'm exploring was a series of kind of tools to use, and in this case it's sound and not smell, to think about how we might deform object or deform space using that as kind of a mechanism. So fortunately for me, in the way that I'm working, so I'm using, in particular, I'm interested in kind of relationship between wildlife and animals, wildlife and humans. And so I'm looking at the way that wildlife sounds kind of manifests physically. And so these are kind of a series of just like visual experiments to see how a a sound produced by a specific species could have some kind of spatial capacity that's like permanent and physical. The problem, so what you see here now is kind of the object itself that kind of comes from the process. And this is kind of the traditional way that we understand sound as a spectrogram and or kind of, and the research that's going on right now, specifically within the kind of machine learning world, is that they're trying to kind of identify specific species based on the spectrogram that exists. And so what I was realizing is that the information is, there's too much noise to kind of effectively pass out what species are where. And so I started to think about ways to kind of specifically identify animals based on a sound. And if there was kind of a database of those sounds that we could generate, we'd be in a much better place. I'll quickly show you a video to kind of, this is about 50 seconds, so bear with me. So this is a species of bird called the Hartlob's franklin. It exists, or spurfile exists in the middle of nowhere in Namibia, very remote, generally difficult to see, difficult to access. And so sound becomes a really critical tool how we understand these things. They're quite, I'm sorry if it's a bit loud. This is the kind of antiphonal duet where they're talking to each other. It's two birds speaking to each other. And this sound was used to generate a series of kind of design objects that you'll see shortly. So you can see basically I'm just driving the distribution of particle points using the sound as a mechanism. So it's a very simple process. All right, so basically what I get to do because of that, I get to produce a series of kind of objects that belong to specific animals. So in this case, I have a leopard, I have a lion, I have black rhinoceros, African elephant, African buffalo. It just, I mean, it's fortunately for me, the Cornell Ornithology Lab has an incredible collection of sounds. They have an amazing library. And so it's totally worth kind of investigating. I've been kind of borrowing from there. Some sounds I collect myself, but for the most part, there are kind of enthusiasts and scientists available that do that work. And I'm very thankful for them. Basically, what this comes down to is an exhibition that I proposed, which is called Sound Bodies, and it's a proposal for like a silent exhibition on sound. So it's thinking about kind of the physical manifestation of kind of sound objects. The real question is, why am I here talking about sound in a conference about smell? I think that's kind of the important point. So I think that, you know, smell manifests quite physically. And one of the things I was thinking about is the East India Docks in London. They still smell like the spices that existed there during the time that the boats were arriving. And I think that this is a fascinating kind of idea about history and layers and memory. And that kind of talks back to what Sissel was talking about in the way that we understand kind of layers of history. And I think that smell is a fascinating way to think about kind of signatures of the city. I'm ideating because I don't work with smell, but I think that smell could be a very fascinating way to kind of map the city and specifically map physical surfaces. So if I understand smell correctly at a molecular level, like certain conditions really facilitate kind of smell to stick around. Unlike sound kind of dissipates almost instantly, but smell has like kind of a lasting history. And so with the right kind of conditions of humidity and granularity on the surface of the wall, you might have kind of an extended period of time that you might think about smell. I'm exploring point clouds, and I think that point cloud systems and smell might kind of manifest in a very similar way, just depending on the resolution you can access. And then lastly, I think, you know, I'm thinking about ways, it would be very fascinating to think about ways that we could identify specific species. I don't know if it would be live, but it'd be very fascinating to know if you could identify specific species of wildlife in the city and or their signatures in some system. And so kind of generate a robust kind of database of information around what species are where. It deals with tenure and things like that. And that's it. Thanks, guys.
That was so evocative to me. I know that many of your images if you didn't know we were talking about sound, that would look like you're talking about smell. And I think in the combining the two and with Sissel's work, oh my God, how amazing that would be. And I think it dovetails really well with the next one, which I will let Karolina introduce Aaron Wisniewski, who's going to talk about something very interesting, which I think integrates the senses. Karolina, would you like to do a very short introduction? And then we'll hear Aaron, and then it's a Q&A.
Hello, so let's welcome Aaron Wisniewski. He's a CEO and designer of OVR technology, and he describes himself as a mad scientist, artist, and olfactory evangelist. Hello, Aaron.
Hey, Karolina, everyone, thank you very much for having me on here. I'll share my screen, a couple slides, and while I'm doing that, I just want to say how cool this is. This is like the conference I've been waiting for my whole life. So happy to be here. So let me, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, you're good.
Good, okay,
good.
Cool. So I want to talk about what happens when you combine our sense of smell with immersive technology like AR and VR and apply it to some really interesting use cases. As you mentioned, my name is Aaron Wisniewski. I'm a CEO and the co-founder of OVR Technology. We supply spatial olfactory technology to the XR industry. So let me quickly start with the genesis of OVR. We saw virtual reality becoming more powerful, more studied, and more widely adopted in 2017. And we saw all of the major influential corporations like Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook getting really, really heavily involved in AR and VR. But we saw the potential of the technology really, really limited by the fact that it was only engaging two senses, sight and sound. And we believe that the key success factor to the future of these immersive technologies lies in our sense of smell. The reason shouldn't be a surprise to anyone here that scent is a critical component of VR, because VR is all about creating rich human experiences. And since human experience begins as sensory input, the more input we have, the more influence we have over the quality of the experience and the outputs of those experiences. And the outputs coming in the form of emotions, memories, motivations, and behaviors. And what's unique about our sense of smell is that it is the only one of our senses with that direct link to the limbic system. And as we know, the limbic system is really the memory and emotion center of our brain and plays a major role in our motivations and our behaviors. And that's why OVR exists. So what our platform does is it intelligently understands user behavior in the virtual world and translates that into real-time, hyper-realistic sensory simulation. And the way we're able to do that is through a combination of micro-technology that we've invented, a really unique software integration, and what we call scentware, which are the physical scents themselves that we aerosolize. And all these work together completely silently and wirelessly in a very small, compact unit to deliver about 130,000 microbursts of scent every single second. And that makes up for, or allows us to create thousands of unique potential odor impressions that can turn on and off in rapid succession, just like you might experience in the real world. So as you explore the virtual world, the OVR technology is releasing exactly the right scent or combination of scents at precisely the right moment. It's also spatial and positional. So as your proximity to objects and events in the virtual world changes, so does the relative intensity and the profile of the different odors. So think of it almost like Dolby surround sound, but for smell. And we've also solved one of the biggest challenges of scent technology that we had encountered in the past, which is latent smell. So rather than smells being released into the air and then lingering, which can actually decrease the quality of the experience and decrease immersion and kind of have the opposite effect that we want, these scents appear and disappear instantaneously. So there's no latent or lingering smell between the events and interactions that happen in the virtual world. So what do you do with it is probably a good question. And there's potential in multiple industries and applications and use cases. Some of the ones that are really interesting are training and simulation for high-risk occupations like fire, rescue, police, military, the management or treatment of PTSD symptoms for vets or general public, consumer product development, arts and entertainment, climate change initiatives, anything that has to do with our knowledge or learning, anything that has to do with our health and wellness, anything that has to do with communication and connection. Scent could be a powerful tool in itself, but also add to the virtual experience. And there's one application in particular that we're really interested in. And that's something that is, I think I went too far. Something that we're really interested in, which is something that affects all of us every single day, which is stress. There's an economic impact of stress, $2.5 trillion a year. And there's also the health impact of stress, which is 90% of all disease and illness as a result of physical and emotional stress. And we wanted to see what would happen if we applied this really interesting technology, the scent technology, to this very real immediate problem. So the framework we developed to do that was drawing on inspiration from some of the most powerful tactics that are already used in integrative and behavioral health. So for example, we know mindfulness works. We know meditation works. We know breath exercises work. We know time in nature works. And we know that olfaction-based interventions and therapies work. So we combined all of those into a multisensory experience that we call Inhale. So what Inhale is in a nature setting of your choice. You can pick a waterfall, you can pick the beach, you can pick mountaintops, you can pick the forest. You're guided through a mindfulness meditation that links your breath with smell and promotes relaxation and positive mood states and mental fitness. And we really wanted to make sure that it's not just like a nice escape or a fun thing to do, but it actually changes your brain and creates more resiliency. So we built the program with leading medical VR experts, olfactory neuropsychologists, and meditation experts, and then ran a pilot study in the Department of Clinical Psychiatry at the University of Vermont Medical Center. And what we found was that of the 50 patients who volunteered for the study, nearly 100% of the participants benefited in some way from the OVR experience. And the average reported reduction in pain, stress, and anxiety was almost 70% actually. And that's just from 8 minutes in the experience. And what might be even more impressive is that these results persisted even hours after the experience had finished. So this is just a pilot study, and there's more research that needs to be conducted, but it shows a lot of promise for the combination of olfaction and immersive technology to meet pressing human need. So I know that I think we're approaching the 5-minute mark, so it's probably a good place to pause and turn it back over to you. But obviously,
thank you, Aaron.
Talk for,
that was so compelling. Oh my God, I cannot believe how far you've gotten. You've answered pretty much all my objections to olfactory VR, which were always mainly only one, which is the latency. And I want to know how you did this, but let's open it up for the Q&A. There's been pouring, the questions have been pouring in. I've recorded some of them. I want to get at least one question per speaker, if we can have them back up and pinned our panelists. So since I don't know if Sissel is still with us, I think she's still there. One of the questions that's coming in is, and thank you again for this fantastic presentation. And please, all of you, please join our think tank and help us as we go forward. One question is, how well do they last, these smells? And what of the idea that when you smell something and then you remember it and you smell it again, you're actually remembering the memory, not necessarily the input. And when I was so compelled to see your smelling of the rocks and all these things, how well can you collect the smell, and how well with your trained nose do you think it corresponds to the actual smell? And what are the challenges in, let's say, remote smelling? If I collect something in a Mylar bag, which we tried with Professor Barwich at a wine, in a winery, and then tried to bring it to the lab, by the time it came to the lab, it smelled like nothing, nothing that we could recognize. How do you battle this degradation of scent?
So the recordings I have done over the last, 25 years in multiple ways with the technology available through the industry and beyond, I've been able to collect a massive amount of data that correspond. This data are literally chemical, the kind of reconstruction or like the various individual. Can you hear me?
Yes, of course.
The various individual molecules within the smell source is then literally separated, and those those individual molecules correspond to my database, meaning the chemistry lab that I have here. That's by now I have up to 10,000 real chemical compounds. So all the data I have recorded, I can, and the formulas in the various, for the various smell recordings, the smell sources are then reproduced endlessly for the purpose of exactly what you just said, to recall, to remember, to talk about it beyond the context they are found in. And that is essential to what I'm talking about in general. You know, I've done research for all these years, various ways with various, in various settings. And the only way it really, you know, I really can accomplish, you know, doing something properly using smell as a communication tool is to take the smell out of its context and really deep dive into subconsciousness. And it sits there. The memory is solid rock, you know, it sits in your subconsciousness. It just needs to be revived. So if you have an apple in front of your table, on your table, and you smell the apple, and you know, but you take away the apple and you have the smell. It's incredible. Don't underestimate. And I think this is exactly my success story. I learned this. I decided to use myself as a guinea pig for 7 years to understand what does it mean to remember through smell. And we have an immense storage in our subconsciousness what smell concerns, and we use maximum 20% of that storage. So this is what we do in the beginning of life, from 0 to puberty. We learn in the context of using all the senses in a playful, joyful, emotional way. What we learn in that period stay with us forever. So what I've been trying to do is to apply exactly that back to adulthood. So whenever I do education, I start with kids. Adults it's too late. You have too much, too much issues already. Unless you really want to change and become neutral, you need a detox, meaning you have to become neutral. We are born neutral. Human, cockroaches, and rats are the biggest generalists on planet Earth. That's my starting point. And that is still what I am. And I have no prejudices. I can go into the hardcores of the hardcores of smell. And for me, it's just another smell. That is what we need to understand before we start to look into technology at all. What is the capacity of smell? The complexity of it is not going to be done by computers. It's not going to be, unless we really understand it, what it does in the context of human and the brain and the body. You know, it is very complex, and I have decided to not even try. Everything what I have come across, what technology is concerned, is just a joke. You know, complexity of smell, the body, that how the body makes sense out of it. If you really want to make it to make sense out of it, is beyond imagination. So
That's
reproduction,
That's so
reevaluation, recontextualize, and take the smell out of its comfort zone and put it on the table. It's like, let's talk about this. Let's smell it again. What does it do to you? And record those reactions. It's what I do since 30 years, you know, and it's beyond, you know, where there's smell, there is life. Where there's life, there is air. So air we breathe, we all share. How can we appreciate that in a different way, you know? And yeah, I think there is hope in the world. And now what we see in the pandemic literally closed down because invisible matter in the air. I mean, it couldn't be a better moment for us to really start working properly, you know?
That's wonderful. You're resonating with all of us, I think. So this dovetails very well with a couple of questions for Aaron, who just came in. One is from Phil Sarazan, who says, those who use drugs to deal with trauma could find an alternative with your tech. I think the answer there, I'll let you say it is yes, but the second question, they're kind of together here, it says, what are the potential misuses of your technology? Have you ever thought of that? So anything powerful will have good and bad. So talk to us about how you can help the people who are dealing with trauma and are hooked on drugs because of it, and how can we help avoid the pitfalls?
Right. Yeah. So I'll start with the more promising one first, and I'll try to keep it as short as possible. But you know, there's kind of two things happening there. There's the inherent power and the inherent value of scent that can be used in all these applications, and then there's its ability to make this technology, in this case, virtual reality, more effective. And so there's a number of different modalities that you can use. For instance, the gold standard for the treatment of PTSD is exposure therapy. So by revisiting and reprocessing difficult memories, you can remove some of the triggers, and you know, the memory doesn't go away, but the symptoms of PTSD. What's difficult about that is it's very uncomfortable. People don't want to do it. So by using virtual reality therapy that takes the pressure off the user and using olfactory cues to bring up the memories in a controlled setting, you can have a really, really ineffective type of therapy and lower drop-off rates. Whereas something like just general talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, IMDR, you could use something like virtual reality to reduce the stress level prior and after those sessions. So you get more effective minutes and you're able to address the thought patterns by controlling some of the behavioral and emotional outputs, so you can more effectively address the thought patterns. So there's a number of the, and even, pain management through distraction is something that you can do. And of course, the inherent value of scent is augmented by the technology. Everyone would like to know that lavender is relaxing, right? But that's just simply not the case. It's a learned behavior if it is. And so you can create that emotional scent memory within virtual reality very, very quickly and very, very powerfully. And then you can leverage that both in and out of virtual reality. As far as misuses, I think the most dangerous misuse is creating is the potential of the technology to cheapen the value of scent, right? People look at virtual reality and think video games and the smell of guns. And I think there's an opportunity to elevate scent, or there's an opportunity to take it away. I think that's the biggest danger. And there's, use your imagination for how to use it, other than that, but we're really focused on the promising parts.
So there's a question for Joris coming in, and have you considered how your sound emanations from the animals, as you track them, also correspond to their olfactory emanations, possibly? Because of course, air movement carries scent. So if a lion is roaring, there's probably a projection of the smell coming out of his mouth. So is that something?
So one of the things that we deal with a lot, at least in my world, is human-wildlife conflict issues. And one of the things that come from that is kind of predictive tools for when the incidents are going to happen. And some of these kind of like early warning systems for communities that have, say, cattle being eaten by lions or hyenas, it might be a really interesting tool to use to kind of think about early warning. I'm not exactly sure how it would be deployed, because smell is very kind of contingent on wind and kind of environmental factors. But I think it could be a fascinating tool to use. But I have a suspicion, and guys, I'm not a scientist, so just, to be clear, but I have a suspicion that domestic animals are using kind of more than just their hearing to determine whether or not they're about to be eaten by a lion. And so I think that there is, anyway, so I think that kind of the application of the smell tool could be very effective for kind of sensing. Yeah, it would work. I think it would work very similarly. And I think that's why Andreas and I kind of came together in the beginning anyway.
That's wonderful. We have only 3 minutes left before the next session, when I'll give it over to Dimitri. So if Karolina and Nikhil, excuse me for not asking them questions, even though I have some for them, because they're going to be here for the entire conference, and we can all ask them at later. There is a couple of questions for Sissel again. Sissel, there's 2 questions, both by Karolina. How do you train your nose? And can you train to get your sense of smell back if you've lost it during COVID?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
We can't see you though, but that's your choice.
But that's okay. I work with invisibility, so maybe it's better. Anyway.
We can't smell you either, unfortunately. Not yet. Not until Aaron's stuff comes about.
Yes, I train my sense of smell every day. I live in the middle of my lab, so as you train your muscles, when you can also train your senses. So that's you just have to embed it in a kind of daily rituals and daily routines, and it is incredible how quick the senses improve if you make an effort to make them improve. So this is my my advice: start to kind of smell consciously, and in my case, I live in the lab, so it's easy to make advanced kind of version of training, more simple one depending on what I'm working on. But it's amazing how you can train this. And whenever I travel, I have my devices with me, I have my toolbox with me. And it's yeah, it's fantastic. So yeah, and of course, if you lose your sense of smell, it's depend how you have lost it. And to regain it, like with COVID, you know, there's a lot of ways of doing it, and many people have worked on this, you know, with various results. So training the sense of smell to come back slowly, make the receptors start to be activated again by training the receptors every day, and slowly you improve. But you need to be patient with this. It's like being, you know, be detoxified, you know, you need to detox before you can start to kind of come on the other side. And that's also the case with smell. You know, we have so much prejudices in our system that is hard to kind of avoid, to kind of, yeah, have to deal with it, you know, when you really start to smell properly, you know. And we live in a world that's covered up with too much that has nothing to do with that reality. So what happened when we start to appreciate how we smell? How is the body smelling? What can we learn from people's smell, you know, before somebody come and cover up, or somebody tell us to cover things up, you know? So start to kind of look into, yeah, what is there, you know? How can we understand what is there on behalf of how it smells? And
Yeah.
having dinner parties, having conversation around smell rather than how things look like and what people say.
Yeah, I have
Thank you. Yeah.
so many more questions, Sissel, and
Yes,
like the dog, the anxious man, the possibility of like creating the language between, for example, bacteria and humans.
Totally.
Now,
Yes, and you know, I learned from animals, I learned from the others, you know, and what I've been doing all these years, for 25 years, with passionate commitment to the topic of smell, it's to scale down and have no prejudices. And being in the field is half my job. I'm out there, I'm talking to the people, I'm talking to the trees, Ababa, I'm talking to, but I try to go beyond the blah blahs, you know, let's do this differently. Like Greta Thunberg so intelligently said, there's enough of blah blahs. Could chemical communication do the talking? I think yes. What I see in Oslo, what I see in Oslo is that is working. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That is the message, and it's a perfect segue into our next section.